Welcome back to Rock Buzz. Today we are going to go way back to 1967 and the Summer of Love in San Francisco. This article appeared in the February 1968 issue of Hit Parader magazine. From an interview that was conducted with the Airplane's Paul Kantner, in the summer of 1967, just as the Airplane are putting the final touches on their now classic LP, after bathing at Baxters. While a voice alike was used here to enhance the story, we assure you that all artists are faithfully represented by the original published text. Now let's head back to the Summer of Love and the great Jefferson Airplane.
Our next album will be called After Bathing at Baxters. I wrote about 5 songs on it. I really can't say which one of our songs is my favorite, so they all mean different things to me. Ballad of You and Me and Pooh Neal is one of the things I wrote, which will be in the album. There's a lot of Winnie the Pooh in that song. We just put music to it and wrote new words. It also has like a little bit of Memphis by Chuck Berry and a little bit of Spoonful by Howlin' Wolf in the music, but I still wouldn't call it blues. You know, like to me, blues are the classic things like Gary Davis. We sat down and started playing different things, and the ones we liked we put in the song, like Grace doing the hard piano thing. The piano sounds much nicer on the album. The single lost a lot of sound. We're always searching for parts that will fit well. You know, hopefully it will all come out together. We don't always succeed naturally. Songs are very hard to describe. I can't say if it's a better album than Surrealistic Pillow because I haven't heard the completed masters, and it looks as though it will be better, however. One of the other songs is called No Paper Cloud Gives Grass Apples. The song is also subtitled Martha. It starts off with finger-picking guitar, which is the root of the song. Then harder things come into it. Then it dribbles back to the picking thing. There's also a very far-off voice thing against it. I wrote that with a friend of mine called Irving Estes. He wrote part of the words. There's another song called Wild Time in a sort of a down-up tempo tune. It's very slow and pulsy rather than what you think a wild time is. It has a 3-part vocal. Another song we haven't titled yet might be Watch Her Ride. It's a love song of sorts. It's difficult for me to put the other songs in words because I didn't write them. Yorma wrote 2 songs, and we're going to pick one for the album. Besides Grace's 2 heads, she'll have a new one called Ulysses, which is sort of a social commentary. She used a lot of the text from James Joyce's Ulysses. That song has to be worked out. Spencer even wrote a song. I'm not sure we'll use it. Marty wrote a thing called Young Girl Sunday Blues. There's another one that's sort of 2 songs put together. It's called Saturday Afternoon, Won't You Try? It's a sketch of a song on Saturday afternoon referring to the San Francisco Be-In back in January. And then it goes into Won't You Try, which is up-tempo. We did a lot of live recording on location at the Fillmore quite a few months ago. A couple of tracks on the album will be from that. We might have to overdub some vocals on those tracks. It's nice to get the live quality of a room. Like the Stones live album, despite all its discrepancies, had a nice feeling. We were trying to finish the album in 4 weeks, but we had to boost it to 6 weeks, and we'll probably need another week to master. You asked about the fancy out front bass playing in San Francisco groups. Our own bassist, Jack Cassidy, is responsible for a lot of that. Looking back over the groups, I'd say you're right. Most of the bass players use their instrument for more than rhythm. A lot of times we sing with the bass. It's just the bass players. We aren't musically restricted. If someone played bass like that a year or so ago, they'd say it was crummy. It's getting away from accepted rock and roll rhythm. We work everything around each other, so everybody has a chance to speak out rhythmically and lyrically. Moby Grape and the Grateful Dead have excellent bass players too. The recording people are having problems working with the new electric bands, even though they've been recording rock and roll for years. As it's actually a brand new sound for them, just like the bass playing, for instance. Everybody from San Francisco has had trouble recording. The Grape, the Grateful Dead, Big Brother, Quicksilver. Somebody once described it as a wall of sound, and it is a solid wall. To pick things out of that wall, an engineer must know how to record it, which takes time. We're starting to get a nice sound, though. In the studio, everything is intellectual. You have to think about what you're doing. On stage, it's strictly emotional. In the studio, you have to do an instrumental track and then put a vocal over it. It's all in pieces, and it has to be put together. We're also having a lot of censorship problems. There's probably less censorship in America than anywhere else, but we still have it. Censorship here, however, isn't very effective anymore. We've learned how to bypass censorship. It might be difficult to understand what the singers are saying, but after a while you can understand them. Then in the promotion department, somebody wanted us to work Carol Doda into our act at the Fillmore. The Fillmore audience would have laughed at it. You know, that topless junk is for the short hair freaks, and it's really depressing, those topless clubs. Yet when we come back off the road, we like to have a few days by ourselves, but when we work on songs, we live together. Like for this album, we rented a house in Hollywood to work on all the material. We have lots of arguments. It's more civil debate rather than armed conflict. It gets pretty wild sometimes with all the ideas. We don't have one person who controls everything. Whoever yells the loudest wins. Our producer, Al Smith, who is an excellent producer, feeds everything we give him into the board. He takes care of the proper balance of the sounds that we feed him. We are in full charge of the music. Smith is in charge of the electronics. It took us about 3 records before we caught on because we were a new group and our first records weren't very good productions. We're very fortunate to have Al Smith now. San Francisco was unheard of at the time and our songs were strange compared to what was in the top 40. We're interested in the sounds of horns, but it's more a philosophical concept. We'd rather do it with voices and guitar sounds. Nobody in the group really plays a horn. Grace sings some nice horn lines, and Jorma plays some nice horn lines on his guitar. We're getting more into that now. Most of the horn things I've been hearing are dull imitations of Motown things. They're not using the horns creatively. That's like the sitar, which was just used because it had a funny sound. Mike Bloomfield's band does some nice things with horns. However, the Cream is a good example of a group that doesn't need horns. And I'm not into jazz enough to say anything about it. And I had a lot of fun jamming with Dizzy Gillespie, and I like John Coltrane and Charles Lloyd, but for me, jazz as such has been dead for a long time. And only certain elements in jazz get to me. By and large, jazz and a lot of classical music is very dull. I grew up with Carl Perkins and Fats Domino, and just like everybody else in our generation. Now, they were great people. We still love that stuff because Rosemary Clooney or somebody like that were singing things that didn't mean anything. That pop music was really irrelevant to anything human. That eventually turned out to be music, restaurant music for people over 40. Musically, we're just expanding, maturing. We're getting more familiar with ourselves.